is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome in to today's episode of KCS An Update. I'm your host, Tucker Franklin. KCS An Update, as always, is presented by our wonderful friends at DraftKings. Use that promo code KCSN when you're downloading that app. Today, I teased it on yesterday's episode when I was with Sterling Holmes. We power ranked the top 5 wide receivers that the Chiefs could see this year. Really good episode. Go check this out. But a very special episode. We're flipping to the defensive side of the ball today, and I thought no better person to talk about Chiefs defensive line with my man Mike DeVito, 9-year NFL vet with the New York Jets. The Kansas City Chiefs have played with some very good defensive coordinators and defensive players as well. Mike, how are you doing today?
Tucker, it's great to be on, man. Thank you for having me. I've missed Chiefs Kingdom. I've missed talking Chiefs football. So it's it's one of those times of year where there's not a lot going on. So when you reached out and said, "Hey, let's chop it up," I was excited. So thanks for having me on, brother.
I know too. When I reached out, it was about that time of year. I think. Because I'm curious, Mike, too, because this time of year, it seems like this is when all these players go on vacation. I'm curious if that timing has changed for you at all since you've been out, or is like this is, what you're used to. You go on vacation at this time of the year, just with everything being dead after mandatory minicamp. Because I sent you a message and I said, Mike's probably not going to be around for that. And then what'd you know that you were out of town?
Tucker, I have 3 young kids, and so there's not much vacation going on. So we had my oldest, my last 3 years in the league, he was born my first year in Kansas City in 2013. Yeah. He was actually born in Kansas City. And since then, once I retired in 2016, we've had 2 more kids. And so there isn't much vacationing going on up here, brother. Right. Anybody with little kids knows you are locked down. But this time of year, I remember being a player, I really enjoyed a lot because you're just honing in and getting ready for the season. And so you don't have some like the logistical stuff of going back and forth to KC and going into meetings and doing it's all your program, your stuff. And actually one of the reasons I moved up to Northern Maine is because my best friend, Matt Mulligan, who also played 9 years in the NFL, right, coincided when I was playing, lived up here. And we had a summer program that we did together that included training, nutrition, film study. We would go against each other. He was a tight end. I was a D lineman, obviously. And so I really enjoyed this time of year because I took it very seriously. And I knew it was an opportunity for me to get an edge on the other guys. Because like you said, so many guys go on vacation. It was like, well, screw that. I'm not going on vacation. I'm going to get ready for the season. So this is where I was able to sometimes get a leg up and just get as strong and explosive as possible. So I like this time of year. And as a former player, even still, whatever it is, 6 years out now, I walk outside and smell the grass and you just tell the season's coming, Yeah. And so I still get goosebumps thinking about it.
That's one of my favorite things that you and Jeff Allen have talked about on the one-on-one podcast is just like you guys can tell your body's sense when it's about to be training camp time. And we're getting close. I mean, it's still probably about a month away. I think July 23rd is the first day for Chiefs training camp when that opens up. So a little under a month away now. But this little layoff here is tough. For people who are fiends for Chiefs content, like I know a lot of people listening to this are, but the defensive line, there's a lot of defensive storylines to talk about. No one better to talk about them during this with. But I mean, I love that you said that you're working out during this time usually, and just trying to get that leg up. It doesn't surprise me at all. From what I know about you, Mike, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, I had to do it, Tucker. I had to do it to keep up. I wasn't as talented as the other guys, so I had to do it. But no, yeah, and it's what's interesting is when July 23rd comes. And, or whatever the day or two before when you hop on that plane and you leave the fam and you're heading back out to training camp, it's like everything, the switch turns on and now you are just totally honed in and focused on the season. And it's just, it's so stark, the difference between OTAs, mini camp, and then summer. And now all of a sudden, boom, now the real thing has started and here we go. And so I think that's why, you become so attuned as a player to the feel outside, the atmosphere and everything, because it's like that big event is coming when the season's right around the corner and your entire life is going to be focused on football. And so it just triggers the mind, the smell of the grass and the heat and the humidity. But it does, I miss the game. It makes I don't know if I ever thought I would say I missed training camp. But these time of years when I go out there and smell that and I just thinking of the guys and thinking about the camaraderie and also the common goal, what you're
Oh yeah.
working for. Like you just miss the hell out of that as a player. So yeah, no, it's but and my wife can tell. She says there's something's up with you again. Like training camps. Really, I'm telling you, it's like every year. She's like, the
That's
season's
awesome.
starting, and I could tell you're acting crazy. So
Some of my favorite podcasts that you and Jeff Allen have done have just been telling stories about training camp and how, you guys both said, man, in the moment, you don't want to go away for that 3 week, 4 week period. But now looking back, you just said, I mean, that's when like championships are won. You see these Andy Reid teams. I mean, he likes to take the team out of the facility and,
right.
and put them in St. Joe and put them elsewhere. They were in Minnesota, but having it in St. Joe is really great for not only the team but like fans as well. To come in and see. So I
It's
mean, I
so
love it.
important, Tucker.
Yeah.
It's so important. We had one year in New York when I was with the Jets where it was the old now, but the CBA stuff. Remember the
Yeah.
lockout and everything in
Yep.
2011, and we didn't end up go. So when I was with the Jets, we went to a college in upstate New York, and we didn't end up going that year because nobody knew what was going on with the season.
Mm.
And boy, the difference. I mean, we didn't have as good of a year, and you could just tell the difference in training camp. It was so weird. Like you'd get done with training camp practice and go home to your apartment. And it was just like this. It was like two worlds that didn't mix.
Yeah.
So I just remember mentally being so jacked up because, training camp is like all in training camp, nothing
Yeah.
else, no distractions. The outside world is gone until we get this taken care of. Uh, but when you're at home doing it at home, I don't know. I just did not like the feel. So I say all that to say I really do like the fact that they go up to St. Joe. I mean, it's a perfect place for training camp.
Oh yeah.
Quiet, it's just a beautiful campus. I mean, you couldn't get any better for training camp. But yeah, no, it's important, and you do miss the hell out of it when it's done.
I love it, and there's a lot of big storylines surrounding the Chiefs this year. Obviously, the quest to repeat once again, and Chris Jones and his contract situation. Now he doesn't show up for mandatory minicamp. I don't necessarily think that's a very big deal because he's gonna get his deal. I don't think anyone has said that the Chiefs don't anticipate on paying him his deal. A lot of people were talking about that, and honestly bad business for Chris Jones to show up to that because what if he gets hurt? And there's a lot of
Right.
things that could go wrong for Chris Jones there, where he's in line to be one of, if not the top paid defensive tackle in the league, because he certainly played like it last year. He really showed his value and his worth to this football team last year.
Yeah, without question. And so, you know, just sort of outside the point of worrying about his contract, I can tell you as a former defensive lineman, OTAs and minicamp are such a waste of time. Um, Especially for somebody like Chris Jones who knows the system, he knows the guys, he doesn't need to learn the defense, he doesn't need to learn the guys around him. But we had a coach in Kansas City, and he was D-line coach at the time, and he brought this up, and I thought it was, it's so true. He's like, I hate OTAs in mini camp because it means I have to take the first week of training camp and sort of uh, get rid of all the bad habits that you guys have picked up as linemen
Yeah.
playing in OTAs, because you're not playing with any helmets. You're playing with just helmets, no spiders, no nothing. And so you stand up and you're patty cake. I mean, you just can't play football. And you're right. You get these terrible habits, and then you stop and go into the summer, and you just sort of downloaded those things. And so if I were a head coach, I mean, like, listen, these guys know more than I do, but and I know, again, sorry, this is tangential to the Chris Jones stuff.
No,
But
good.
while I'm on my soapbox, if I were a head coach, especially a team like a veteran team like this, I would let the Owen defensive line just do individual drills and then lift weights and run and try, and all that stuff that you couldn't do as much as you used to be able to because of the CBA.
Right.
I would have them. I would just totally let them miss all of that stuff because it just teaches bad habits. So okay, but yes, going to Chris Jones now. Back to the actual the important point. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not worried about that. They're going to get it done. These things take, for whatever reason, I've never been behind the scenes, but they take so much time to get worked out. And especially when you're dealing with somebody of Chris Jones's caliber, right? And you have to also take into account the fact, and somebody brought this up, it might have been you, Tucker, the last time we were talking, but the fact that, look, you also got to reward your own guys. I mean, Chris Jones has done so much for that program, or the program, so much for that organization. And I've been in college football now doing college, so I
Yeah.
said program.
There
So
you
much
go.
for the organization and that fan base and those Super Bowls and everything. I mean, Chris Jones is, at the top of the list as far as guys that have gotten that done.
Yeah.
And so just for the climate of the team, for the locker room to see, hey, we're going to reward the guys that get it done here. We're going to take care of our own guys. And so I really think I know that there's a precedence on getting him signed, and I know that these things take time. Again, and this is what I was going to say before, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's going to have the highest paid contract, for any defensive line, which he deserves. And so the stuff takes time to iron out. And again, I think it's a silver lining that he wasn't at OTAs anyway, because he doesn't get hurt and he doesn't learn bad habits practicing without pads on. So, but
Yeah.
I do think they're going to get it done. They're going to get it done.
He's still in Kansas City too. It's not like he's out gallivanting, globe trotting. He's
Exactly.
not doing that. He's in Kansas City. He was at the barbecue fest that they held at Arrowhead the other day, and
Right.
honestly, I can't blame him for going to that. I would want to go to the barbecue fest too. That sounds
Right.
sounds like a good
He
good,
loves Kansas City.
yeah.
So so if you want to compare it to another situation, when I was with the Jets in 2010, we had Revis going through a contract situation, Darrelle Revis, and it was heated. And I remember we were worried that we might not get him, that he might actually sit out a year. But right towards the end of training camp, when things start to get real, right? When the
Yeah.
season's right around the corner and you got to hurry up and somebody's got to make a call because things are about to start, that puts pressure on everybody to get it started. And eventually they got Revis done and he was back in the building. And Revis was much more distant Revis is really a businessman. So he did not care. Chris, not that he's not a businessman, but this man loves Kansas City.
For sure.
He loves his fan base. And so if he was disgruntled or what anything, he wouldn't be hanging around Kansas City. So again, all signs to be the point to be very optimistic that this is going to get done in time for him to be ready for the season.
Absolutely. I'm very optimistic Chris Jones will be playing for the Kansas City Chiefs on a new contract this year. But someone else playing on a new contract this year, Derek Nottie. I'm curious, Mike, your thoughts. He had kind of a little bit of a down year. I think a year that people didn't anticipate. But how big is it to bring him back? Because we talk about them drafting Coburn. They signed a few guys, Brandon Williams being one of them on practice squad guys, just to keep some depth in that interior defensive line room. Because it seems like the trend now with defensive lines. You saw the Eagles do this all year. They get guys and they just throw waves of defensive linemen at these offensive linemen. And
Right.
how big is it to bring back a guy like Derek Nottie who already knows that system, who maybe might have not have had the best year last year, but able to get him on a deal from a team perspective and get him in that to have a little bit more flexibility depth wise with that.
Yeah. So before we even get into that, I do wonder, and I would have to look at the tape. I haven't studied Nottie's tape specifically, but I do know when I went out to Kansas City, and it's the same way now. When you're surrounded as a defensive lineman, especially like Nani, who was like me, a bigger sort of run stop, and not that he's much more athletic than I am, obviously, but he more of a first, second down run stop and bigger guy. It's hard to make plays when you're surrounded by Chris Jones and Frank Clark and all these playmakers. I mean, you got all those guys out there. I had to deal with it with Tamba Hali and Justin Houston and Derek Johnson, even Eric Berry flying through holes, Dontari Poe. I mean, I had 60, 70 tackles 2 years in a row in New York. And then I came to Kansas City and I had like 20 because I'm curious, is it a down year because he fundamentally he was messed up or just wasn't getting in the rhythm, or that could be, or was it a down year just because he's competing with trying to make plays with the greatest players playing the game? So, and that's a question I don't know, but yeah, no, to your point, I mean, you always want to keep veteran guys in that room, especially like you said, when you're bringing in younger guys in that interior spot. To teach them show them the ropes. This is what is expected of you, when it comes to our defense. This is what is expected of you as a defensive lineman. This is how you play the various techniques. Nottie's always, I thought, had great technique in the run game. He can share that with not that Coburn needs to be taught much because he's freaking unbelievable. But no, always having a veteran presence like that is really important. In fact, I think Kansas City kept me around my last year just for that reason. Just to have a guy who could be that veteran presence, who could get, the other guys ready to play. And so now Nadi has much more in the tank than I did my last year, but he is a really good player. I've always enjoyed watching him. And so, yeah, so he has the ability and skill to produce. And just like you had brought up, I mean, having the more veterans you can have in there, the better. And I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like teams are getting younger and younger and
Oh, yeah.
younger. Like Tucker, when I was playing, Derek was in, I don't know, his 10th year. Tomba was in his 10th or 11th. Like you had all
Right.
these guys 10, 11, 12 years. Now I feel like you look at a roster and you might have some kickers and punters and quarterbacks up there, and then everybody else is 4, 5, 6. I mean, I don't know. So again, just the more veteran leadership, the better. And you also know the type of character guy that he is. And he's
Absolutely.
a good character guy. I mean, that's just Kansas City. He wouldn't be there if he wasn't. But yeah, so for all those factors, I'm excited to have him back. And I wouldn't be surprised if his production shoots up, just given that
Yeah.
the opportunities there, and he has the ability to make plays. So you just gotta, and you don't have to beat Frank Clark there anymore. You still got to beat Chris there,
Right.
but you don't have to beat Frank. So got one of those guys out of there.
There's one guy I want to talk about, and I know that you're very high on him. You brought him up already, Keandre Coburn. But first, Mike, we've got to take a break. But when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about Keandre Coburn and how he can possibly help Derek Nadi this year. So we'll be right back after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
I'm hanging out with Mike DeVito here on today's KCS and Update presented by DraftKings, talking some defensive line. And Mike, I know that you are a big fan of the guy they drafted out of Texas, Keandre Coburn. How do you think that, this is rookie year, a guy who I don't know if is anticipated to come in and start right away, but a guy who has shown the ability to stuff the run. How do you think that he kind of helps Derek Nadi this season with just having a guy back there that, is one of those guys that can stop the run?
It's a great the two of them are a great interior combination for first and second down stuff. And it allows you, I mean, Coburn, watching him. So, and I've said this before, and so Craig, myself, and DJ sat down the defensive film room and broke down Coburn's stuff from Texas. And you had said it before we started, and I think everybody said it. It's just amazing when you watch his tape that he fell so low in the draft. And I can't help but think, it's become so much of a passing league, and maybe there isn't, just like there isn't as much of a premium on running backs, there isn't as much of a premium on, run defender, defensive lineman type guys. Not that he can't get pressure, because we saw that too. But he's a guy that, in 2007, when I came out, if he got drafted in the first or second round, I'd be like, yeah, no doubt. I mean, he just is fantastic. His technique is already so advanced. And so what's beautiful is I don't see him having any problem, especially as big, as strong as he is. I don't see him having any problem transitioning in right away and play. If you're playing a team like Tennessee or something who's going to run the football, get into more traditional stuff, you have a great lineup now with, Nadi and Coburn at a 3 technique and nose.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is a solid front. You can stop the run there. And you're going to get it done well. Those guys have great technique. And now you can move Chris around and obviously all the other dynamic guys that they have. But yeah, I mean, that's what I love about him, is you can watch his tape and see, oh yeah, this is a guy, you could plug him in right away and he's ready to roll. Like, I don't see him needing a lot of coaching to say, okay, so he was a 6th round guy, right?
Yep.
So normally with a 6th round player, 6th, 7th round, you're thinking, okay, this is a guy we have to develop and get ready. And I don't see that with him on tape. It looks like his technique, his ability to react to blocks in front of him, right? He's reacting to back blocks. He's reacting to pull. I mean, everything that normally you see guys in college just sort of run up the field, he's already playing like a technician. And that stuff really doesn't get that much faster in the NFL. That stuff happens quick regardless. And so I love it because I think he can come in and play in those rundown situations right away. And he also has the ability as a big man, just like Noddy, to be explosive and get upfield. In fact, I always forget his name. Who was our D tackle that went to New Orleans?
Oh, Colin Saunders.
I love him too. He
Yeah.
reminds me of Saunders.
Yeah.
Saunders is a beast, and I feel like he's those three are of the same mold.
Very much so.
And Saunders was really productive. I mean, what Saunders had 4 or 5 sacks last year.
Oh yeah, his
So
best year.
yeah, so I see Coburn fitting in right in that spot. And I wouldn't be surprised if down the road we're having a conversation a few years from now, thinking, just like we're talking about Chris Jones, maybe not to the same extent, but boy, how are we going to pay Coburn? What I mean, he's just so good, and he looks tough. I mean, go look at his profile picture.
Man.
Like, oh damn! Like if I was getting in a street fight, I want that dude on my side.
He's very physically intimidating too, because we sat down with him at the East West Shrine Bowl.
That's right.
He's a big human being. You would believe it if you said that guy's a defensive lineman. You said, "Yep, I can tell that," because he's big. We sat down for the interview. I remember I had to zoom the camera out a little bit because he was sat down and he had his feet spread out and he was leaning in the conversation, had the mic real close and was just very demanding, a very, very demanding physical presence, man. He's that guy.
Tucker, they were doing, the Chiefs had put their recent photo shoot up, or somebody did, I don't know, where they were taking the pictures, and he had his game pants on. His quads are massive. I was like, man, I wish I had quads. I mean, I'm talking gigantic.
Yeah.
I don't know how Alan Wright is going to find shorts that fit that man. But yeah, no, I'm really excited for him. I mean, he's one of those guys that, shoot, I might get his jersey, put it on the wall. I mean, he just reminds me of the old school, like the way that us old timers look back and say, man, I wish football was like that. And he reminds me of that. So I'm really excited about him. And again, given what I've seen on tape, I don't see the learning curve being so substantial for him getting to play on Sundays.
That's super exciting. And I know we talked to Eric Gauka, who was the director of the East West Shrine Bowl, kind of about Keandre Coburn and kind of why he fell so far. And it's interesting too when you talk about the shift in focus of teams. It's more of a passing league now, as you mentioned, and there's only about a handful of teams that have their nose, like they need a nose guard and that they're going to take fairly early. There's only a handful of teams that are going to do that, and the handful of teams that needed a nose guard early went elsewhere. And so that's why Coburn kind of fell. Try to say both of his names at the same time. Keandre Coburn at the same time. He fell a little bit in the draft, a little bit further, because I remember Craig Stout during our live draft show was saying, like, round 4, he's like, okay, Keandre Coburn right here. Would love to see it. That'd be great value at round 4. And got him in round 6. Really great addition, and I'm very excited to see just kind of the versatility that this adds to the offensive or the defensive line, I should say, with guys. The young guys that they have on the edge too. And you talked about leadership, and it's a very interesting point that you bring up. I was listening to an interview with a different sport, but Big Papi, David Ortiz, was talking about baseball now. And you look at, I think sports as a whole has really shifted to a lot younger guys. And one of the things that David Ortiz said, what helped him so much is having those veteran guys to talk to and learn from. And now you're seeing these baseball teams, these football teams be full of young guys, young talent. Like not that they're untalented, but guys that just don't have the league experience that, guys like, Patrick Mahomes had coming up. He had Alex Smith, a guy that was phenomenal to learn from. A lot of these younger guys don't have that experience. So when Frank Clark signs with Denver for a really good chunk of change, honestly, he wasn't going to get that in Kansas City. Just they didn't have that money for him. So shout out Frank Clark for getting that money. Does it worry you at all with the way that defensive end room is, that edge room kind of is, that they've got a lot of young guys there and not a whole lot of NFL experience? I mean, Charles Minnie, who's been in the league for 4 years, that they've added to that room, but there's a potential they could add a Carlos Dunlap still when training camp comes along. But as of now, it looks like it's Karlaftis, who's been in the league for 2 years, Dana 3, I believe, and then you got B.J. Thompson, Felix Anudike Uzama, outside of Minihue as well. 2 rookies going into that room. So what are your kind of thoughts on the composition, kind of the roster building of that area?
Yeah, I've always been big. I think you do want to have as much leadership as you can dispersed throughout the team. But I think when where the rubber meets the road is you just need good leaders in the locker room, right? So I had great leadership. We had great leadership when we were in Kansas City. We had older guys, but like the guys that are going to right the ship when things need to, when you really need a leader to step up, are the guys like Eric Berry, right? So I'm listening to EB regardless of what position he is, just because he knew when it was time to get to step up and get things going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so there's leadership in the sense that you want the guys to learn the techniques, learn, how to be a pro, things like that. And that does come within the position, but I'm not super worried about it, just because I know you still have Mahomes, you still got Kels, you still got Chris, you still got, these veteran leaders who have done it, who have been there, who have a ton of playoff experience. So, I mean, they're ready. They know every situation. And so I guess when I'm evaluating the leadership of the locker room, I'm looking at that top end leadership first, because that's where the premium is. Do you have the guys that can pick this team up if things aren't going well? Do you have the guys that can convey the message of what the playoffs are like? Do you have the guys that can get a team at halftime and then get them going, or get a team at halftime and keep them going in the right direction? That's the primary focus. Everything else after that is sort of the cherry on top. And so am I worried that they don't have that? No, I think they're talented guys. Would it be nice to have an older guy in there? Sure. It's basically another coach on the field. But so, like, taking me as an example, we go 11-5 in 2015, regardless if Mike DeVito is on the D line or not, to lead the young guys, because we just had good leadership across the board. So again, it's important, but the top end leadership is what you're really looking for, and we have that.
It was interesting too. I think that Carlos Dunlap even said in an interview recently that he would be open to return to Kansas City. When he signed his deal last year, it was in the middle of training camp, so it's not like that he's in any rush. He's one of those veteran guys that says, "I don't need to go through all of these OTAs, mini camps."
Well, and
I'll
Andy
sign in
Reid
the middle
does
of
that.
Yeah.
Andy Reid does that. In fact, if I could have convinced my wife, my in 2016, I might have had the opportunity to come back and do that. I mean, he does that with older guys.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no doubt. You could totally see him bringing Dunlap back and plugging him in that spot. And if I'm Dunlap, you're right. You're thinking the same thing. And that's another thing too. And you were talking about this, the speed of the game. And one of the reasons why you might not have some of these older players is, boy, if you slow down just a little bit in this league is so fast. I mean, so much faster, Tucker, than when I was there 10 years ago. That you slow down just a little bit, and now it's, when I was playing, you might have been okay. Now you cannot produce, you can't get it done. And so to get a guy like Dunlap to let his legs rest so he can give you as much like, he doesn't need another training camp.
No.
You know what I mean? So he's ready to go, to be explosive as he can for as long as he can. So that's just a smart move regardless. But again, going back to the leadership point, I think they're fine either way, but it is a cherry on top to have him in there.
Absolutely. We're going to take one more break, Mike. I want to get some of your final thoughts on this defense as a whole. I've been on record. I've been saying it a few times. I think this defense can be a top 5 unit this year. I want to get your thoughts coming up right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Hanging out here with Mike DeVito on today's KCSN update presented by DraftKings. I'm Tucker Franklin. We're talking Chiefs defense. Now, I've said this to a few people, and a few people have kind of wanted to dampen my mood about this Chiefs defense with, the moves that they made, bringing in Charles Omenihu, who had 4.5 sacks last year, 11.5 in his career, a guy who is very versatile inside, outside. They bring in Drew Tranquil to talk about the linebacker room, a guy who is incredibly versatile in this league, especially when it comes to covering. I think he was either the second or third rated coverage linebacker in this league.
You gotta have that.
You have to in this NFL. They've got the youth on in the secondary with Brian Cook, all those young guys, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, Trent McDuffie, L'Jarius Sneed is still on his rookie deal. So they have so many young guys back there, and Justin Reed, they kind of got as the anchor right there in that veteran safety they have. And I've said, I think if everything goes right, which, everything doesn't go right. That's just how it is. If everything goes right and this team plays up to their potential, I think that they can be a top 5 unit in the league. A lot of people say top 10. They'll be a top 10. I think they'll be a top 10 defense regardless.
Right.
But I think they can really elevate themselves to that top 5.
Yeah, I think about Kansas City's situation on defense, and I'm not even worried. Not that I'm not worried, but I do feel like at the end of the day, sometimes defensive statistics in a situation like Kansas City's are not as um, informative as they would be on other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Given that every team's going to play Kansas City with thinking this is going to be a shootout. We
Yep.
have to throw the ball all over the place. And a lot of those teams are playing from behind because you're playing against Mahomes. They're scoring 21 points in 30 seconds. And so your defensive mindset a lot of times for Kansas City is going to change. You're going to loosen up. Give them 10, give them 15 yards. Let them throw here or there because it doesn't matter. Just as long as they're not scoring and we're getting the ball back to Pat Mahomes, we're good. And so I used to see this with the Patriots sometimes, when Tom Brady in his prime, where they might not have the top ranked defense, but that's because they're playing in a lot of these situations where teams are just hucking the ball all over the place trying to catch up, and so you have this non-standard offense that you're going against because teams are always playing from behind, which lends itself to more yards, but at the end of the day, they're winning games because teams just can't score, can't beat them. And so when I look at Kansas City, I don't doubt that you're right. I think you're totally right. They could totally be a top 5 team. I think anytime you're evaluating a team going into another year with the same coordinator, the same playbook, I know as a player, you start to pick up on little nuances, right? So the first year you get the defensive book and you're just learning, where do I be? What are the calls? This and that. Then as you go, you're starting to figure out, okay, not only do I know where I am, but now I know where the other guys are. Now I know where the DBs are filling in the run game. Now I know how the blocking schemes are going to look against certain fronts. Now I know how to play this versus how to play that. And so the more you have that going, and you have guys like you talked about the young secondary that did so good in their first year, or being younger guys, now they're going to be even that much more advanced mentally. So that mental game I'm always looking at. You have all these guys, again, second, third, fourth year in this playbook. Even more than that. I mean, that's scary. And that is conducive to being a really, really good defense, is just knowing inside and out, mastering the defense that you're playing. But they certainly have the talent. They have the coaches in place. But again, I just like I'm sure all of them say, what's most important is W's. And if you're giving up more yards because you're playing more prevent defenses because Mahomes and them have scored 555 points, then so be it.
Just imagine how dominant this Chiefs team can be if they do give Patrick Mahomes a top 5 defensive team. Like he's already won Super Bowls with average defenses, with statistically average defenses, and if you give him a statistically top 10, top 5 defense, it's not gonna be fair. It's not gonna be fair.
Tucker, the defense they had when they lost to the Patriots in the AFC, that was like one of the worst ever, right? I mean, that was like like the 9th or 10th worst defense, and they're in the AFC Championship game. I mean, that's like, I couldn't imagine what it's like as a defensive player to be on this team. I can tell you, as a defensive lineman, even as a first, second down run stopper, I would have been in a greyhound stance every time, 100 miles an hour off the football. Like I'm going to try to get as many sacks as I can. I don't run the football. Who cares? You can't beat us running it. You can run it every time. Like it's just got to be. I never experienced it as a player. I had really good offenses. I never experienced having an offense this dominant. Where, again, as a fan watching these guys, if we're down 21 points, whatever.
Yeah.
We get that back. Well, they can get that back in 30 seconds. So it's really unique. I mean, we're really living in a special time as Chiefs fans, not to be over dramatic, but it is. I mean, this is very unique, very fun to have all these Hall of Famers and some of the best guys to ever play the game playing at the same time on the same team. We're one of the greatest head coaches to ever play. So there isn't much that worries me, Tucker. And so, yeah, I forget what your question is. I'm fired up.
I love it. No, I love it when you just get going and get fired up. That's what I just basically am trying to do, is get you fired up. To get people fired up for, training camp coming up in like a month. We still got like a month's worth of shows to do before then. Hopefully Chris Jones will sign a contract, so we got something to talk about.
We got to get Chris on here. We got to get Chris on and talk to him.
I know
He's such a great guy.
He's tweeted out before that he wants to stay. Like he said, I'm a Chief for life, never going to play for another franchise. So I don't think people should be worried at all. I know that people were kind of worried when like Stephon Diggs didn't show up to mandatory minicamp there, and that was kind of a surprise to everybody. I don't really know if that's on the same level as the Chris Jones thing. You kind of thought that maybe he's not going to show up for this. What is mandatory minicamp? 4 days, 3 days?
Yeah, 3 days.
Yeah. So 3 days of doing drills in t-shirt and shorts, not really a risk worth willing to take. But
go relax, Chris. Go relax. Get the contract hammered out and put your feet up. What year is Chris? Is in year 8 or year 9? What year is he in?
Oh gosh, I gotta look that up. I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're okay, because he's been with the team for, this would be his 3rd contract, I believe, with the team. So
yeah, well, 2016 was his first year, right? So
yeah. Let's see if I
year
can
8.
spell Jones. Yeah.
8.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and I bring that up to say, at year 8, it's not bad to rest your legs a little bit.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Especially given the length of the season and everything. Put those legs up, Chris. Get ready to go. We need you that first kickoff. I'm not too worried about OTAs, mini camp, even training camp. Who cares?
Yeah, just get right at this point, get healthy. We're super excited though to see all of that kind of unfold, and as we get closer to the time to see this defense take shape. But Mike, appreciate you hopping on, spending some time with me, talking some defense. You're the man. I really appreciate you spending some time and hanging out.
Tucker, I love you, brother. This is so much fun. Chiefs Kingdom, I miss you all out there. Thank you for having me on, Tucker. I'm excited for the season, man. I'm excited to be rolling with you guys again. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fun year.
Very excited. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of KCS and Update. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this episode. Let us know what you thought in the comment section below, what you think of this Chiefs team and this Chiefs defense. Very excited for it. So I'll be back next week with another KCS and Update. So until then, I'll talk to you guys later.